rarely come to me with a credit issue. They tend to come to me when life happens, right? Whether it's divorce happens, job loss, loss in the family, illness, somewhere along the way, their financial confidence got shaken.
Right.
So, what I love doing is really helping people move forward beyond those crises.
And you and I are very aligned in this, right? Because I think that when it comes to financials, education is first. I think that the reason so many people avoid the financial conversations until it's not too late, but it's like so far down the path is because they're terrified, right? To be wrong. They're terrified to feel stupid.
Tends to be the biggest guard to have to drop, right? The biggest obstacle to overcome is the fear, right? And so many people, I think, have this misconception that your credit score is kind of a reflection of your character. And I
Right.
think it's really important to separate the difference. It's, your credit score is a chapter of the story. It doesn't have to be the title.
Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Financial Mastery Simplified. I am your host, Jacqueline or Jax Crider. Today we have Ron on. He is an amazing credit expert, which is so important, right, in the financial space. And so welcome, Ron. Tell us a little bit more about who you are, what you do, and why you're excited to be on the show today.
No, absolutely, Jax. Thank you so much for having me on. My name is Ron Monaco. I'm one of the co-founders of Requalify 360. We are a financial literacy and credit coaching company. I've been in the financial world for a little over 22 years, both in mortgage lending as well as automotive finance, and now in consumer credit counseling, essentially. And the one thing that over our time since starting Requalify is people rarely come to me with a credit issue. They tend to come to me when life happens, right? Whether it's divorce happens, job loss, loss in the family, illness, somewhere along the way, their financial confidence got shaken.
Right.
So what I love doing is really helping people move forward beyond those crises.
I love that. And you and I are very aligned in this, right? Because I think that when it comes to financials, education is first. I think that the reason so many people avoid the financial conversations until it's not too late, but it's like so far down the path, it's like a much more major issue is because they're terrified, right, to be wrong. They're terrified to feel stupid. And let's be real, money is so important that it does kind of make us feel a little stupid because even when we feel like we have a pretty good understanding of it, then something else happens unexpected and we're like, crap, I didn't know that could happen, or I didn't know that they could do that, or whatever the case. And it's a frustrating situation, but especially when you're in big life transitions.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. And that tends to be the biggest guard to have to drop, right? The biggest obstacle to overcome is the fear, right? And so many people, I think, have this misconception that your credit score is kind of a reflection of your character. And I
Right.
think it's really important to separate the difference. It's, your credit score is a chapter of the story. It doesn't have to be the title. So, that's just a reflection of your current financial system. If you're ready to make the commitment to yourself and treat your financial health as importantly as any other field and factor, whether it's medical health, mental health, financial health tends to be that one subject that we don't necessarily talk about at Sunday dinner, right? And I think, so many people just have that guard up, where one thing that I see commonly is how many of those conversations kind of start with almost like an admittance, like an apology, right? Oh, I'm sorry, but I did this, and that's it. We're so defensive. We can absolutely get to the other side of it, Jax. It just takes a commitment on the consumer's behalf and just the correct planning, understanding the systems that are there for you to master and how to put them to work for you on a unique case by case basis.
Yeah, it is interesting that you say that because and I don't know how much you know about my personal story, but I laugh and I say that. So, quite a few years back now, almost, gosh, 5.5, almost 6 years, my husband and I decided to purchase this big, nice luxury property. And at the time, we made a ton of money, tons of money in the bank. Like, none of these were any kind of issues. And then life happened. So, a series of events. My daughter was born 8 weeks, 2 days early. She spent 47 days in the NICU. Mortgage industry started shrinking in a hot hurry. So, we are over here and like, okay, we're going to do the financially responsible thing before it gets too bad. We're going to sell this house and that's going to be how it's going to go. And when this house was under contract for sale, we don't know if it was the inspector, the realtor, or the buyer, but somebody left a half bath water running and it ran for 3.5 days and did over $500,000 damage worth to the house. And so in the process, we were not able to pay a ton of our debts. Mainly credit card related debts. And so our credit started going into the complete tank, right? And it's super funny because it's not exactly like it made me feel great about myself, right? Like I didn't love that super feeling of like struggling and like, getting called by collectors and things like this. However, I also, because I'm in this space, knew that my credit score was not the benchmark of my success, right? It was not the lagging indicator of like, oh, this is what you have to do. And also, as you know, credit's super malleable, right? It is super able to be changed. In fact, sometimes fairly quickly. Sometimes it takes a lot more time. It kind of depends on the circumstance. But absolutely, it comes back to are you willing to put in the work, right? And so now my husband and I work on getting ourselves back exactly where we want to be, exactly what that needs to look like. But so often we are equating that score because of how important it is in our society to our self-worth, and we're tying these so tightly together that we are forgetting that sometimes it is what it is and you just have to muddle your way through it and talk to an expert, a professional who knows how to guide you and say, okay, take this next step, right? Do this next thing. And I get that it's hard because I've been there, and I wish I could say that this is the only time my credit has ever taken a little bit of a hit. But I also know that it's not forever and it is a process and you move through it. But like I said, a lot of people, they tie themselves so heavy to this number, like it's the only thing that matters.
No doubt, and it's again, it's overcoming that fear. It's just people get into such a state of guilt, this spiral guilt, if you will, and all of a sudden they're afraid to answer the phone. They don't want to look at their accounts. They don't want to open the mail, and that's the if you can separate the personalization and understanding that life events are going to happen. The life event isn't the definition of your character, it's how you respond, right?
Absolutely.
What you're willing to gather, what you're willing to do better to create a better financial infrastructure for yourself. And my job isn't to just kind of wave a magic wand and make everything better, but sometimes people just don't have the answers. They need to speak with somebody that does understand the system, and that's it, is taking that first step to say, I want to learn something new, and not putting it off till tomorrow. I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to take control of your financial journey, then you have to stop making the excuses for putting it off and make the excuses to why you have to put down what you're doing and start it right now.
That's absolutely true. We actually have something that we offer anybody who's like trying to go through the process of buying a house, and it's totally free and it helps them understand like what are the steps, what is the process, where is your credit currently, like where will your credit likely need to be, like if it's not there already, right? Because I think that so oftentimes that's the other thing. We wait and we wait and we wait and we wait. And then we want an expert like you or me to wave a magic wand to be able to undo all of these months or years or whatever of these decisions. And there's nothing wrong inherently with the decisions, right? They were made, whether they were the right decisions or wrong decisions. Well, guess what? Hindsight's 2020. So I'm sure some of them were right and some of them were wrong. Like that's just the way that it goes, right? But a lot of times they haven't thought through the fact that, hey, in order to get to where we want to be, like we are going to have to figure out those steps. And by the way, if a professional's any good, they're going to help lay that out for you, the path. Because the problem that I see a lot is that people have this idea of what needs to happen. Like, I'll give you a perfect example on the mortgage side. I can't tell you how many people come to us and they're like, hey, I paid off all of my debt. And I'm like, amazing. I love this for you. I love that you paid off, all or some of most of your debt. How much money do we have in our savings account, to be able to account for down payment, closing costs, any of these kind of things? Well, I don't, because I was paying down all my debt. And I'm like, well, you might have needed to pay down some of your debt, but you might not have needed to pay down all of it. But by the time they come to me, they already made those decisions, as opposed to having a conversation with me and letting me help them maneuver. Okay, myself and my team, hey, okay, we're going to pay off this. We're going to keep this alone, right? We want to keep this much money in our account. We want to do this. And so oftentimes, and I don't know if you guys see this in your space, it's like they're muddling through without having some real conversations with true experts they trust.
Yes.
And so they're making mistakes, not necessarily because they're stupid, but because they don't know.
Exactly, and I can relate that to that as well. Obviously, given my background as well as in mortgage financing, it's kind of funny and almost redundant. It's we teach the process, so to speak, of how to buy a home, but we don't talk about or educate on how to qualify for the mortgage, right? And
Right.
and in the preparation that really takes, it's almost kind of a fast decision, and I don't think people are really prepared. It's like going to physical therapy, and nobody goes to physical therapy and expects to be cured, right? In just one appointment. It's going to take a series of wins, small steps, and consistent improvements to
Right.
ultimately get where you want to get. And qualifying, whether it's for the mortgage, the car, your own business, you have to be prepared ahead of time. And that's the biggest conversation to have with my clientele. It's understanding where they feel they are and what they feel got them there, but also having an understanding of what that 1 year, 5 year, 10-year goal is, because that's my real job. Is I'm bridging the gap to give them their financial confidence back and to educate them along the way in the process. It's unreal. It's such a mixed bag of education out there, and you need to lean on somebody who specializes in that field to not be afraid to pull punches and not pull punches, rather, and be able to say, okay, this needs to get better. This is what you're doing well. This is how you can improve upon it. And that's okay. I mean, it's just, again, it's really about dropping the guard. When I sit down with a client or I speak with a client on the phone, I'm not there to judge them. I've lived it. I've been through my own financial hardships in life. I'm a father of three, and I've been with my wife 18 years. For 10 years of that, my wife was a stay-at-home mother. And as the world got crazier, I certainly understood what it meant to have to be, a little bit tricky in the world to keep our head above water. So I think once people realize that they can drop the guard, they can drop the fear, and just have a cordial conversation, because nothing will ever get better until we say it out loud, I think, until we really admit to ourselves, this is where I need help, and to not be afraid to say, this is what I don't know or how to make it better. So, that's ultimately what we're there for.
Well, and while you were talking, I was grabbing, you were talking about people don't understand the mortgage process. So I actually wrote Mortgage 101, The Secret Sauce to Home Buying. And the whole reason I wrote it was because of that, because I got so tired of seeing people and they had this huge desire to buy the house or whatever, but they didn't understand how the financing worked behind it. And so oftentimes when you are looking at some of the financial aspects, it feels like you need some kind of degree in it and mortgage to like understand what the heck people are even saying and like why does the different pieces matter. And so I was like, I want to be able to lay out for people, okay, these are like the steps, this is like the process of like how you're going to fill out an application and why these pieces matter, and like how this all kind of connects the dots, and the questions that you should be asking yourself, like as you're going through the process, the questions you should be asking experts to figure out if they're in line kind of with what you want. Because I say all the time, that's the other piece of this, is that so oftentimes people are misaligned with like who they should be working with. And, as you know, not everybody is everybody's client, right? Like different strokes for different folks. Like I'm definitely not everyone's cup of tea. That's a-okay, right? And that's perfectly fine. But I also want people to make sure that they are in alignment. So that comes with like asking questions. And I think that curiosity is probably one of the bigger, more important tools that we all have at our disposal and that we should be utilizing bigger and more for every aspect of our life, not just this, but especially this, because a lot of times, like for instance, with credit, and you can back me up on this or whatever, people don't understand why when they pay all of their bills on time, their credit can still look like trash, right? Like, well, why is that? Like, why does my credit score still look like, low 600s or high 500s when I'm literally just paying all of my bills on time? Well, I mean, as well as I do, could be utilization, right? Like how high are those credit cards? Are they all maxed out? Right?
Mhm.
Do you happen to have some collection on your report that you didn't know about, medical specifically? That's like one of the worst.
Yeah.
And people just don't. But you're not going to know that if you're not asking questions. So like, why is my credit score not where I want it to be? Like, what do I need to be doing?
No, 100%. And I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you really just brought up. And it does. You have to ask the right questions, but also, again, taking the accountability side of things, drawing, you have to take that first step. And in the credit world, monitoring your credit is definitely number one key, right? To
Yep.
any financial blueprint. And again, it's just being able to stay realistic and humble in the process, because financial mastery, it's not about perfection. It's about
Correct.
confidence. It's about understanding your options and where you are. And I think, and again, tying it back to the fear aspect, is setting realistic expectations. People need to give themselves permission, right, to start where they are instead of
Right.
wishing where they were. And again, I think if you can just drop that guard and be true to yourself and honest with yourself, then you can build, then you can talk to the right people. Because like anything, if you're not honest with yourself about your situation and what you need to learn, then the help you can get will only be at surface level, right? So, and again, and we see it in the industry all the time, especially when it comes to credit score. And believe me, when we started Requalified, that tended to be one of the more asked about questions. Is, Ron, like you said, I work hard, I make a good income, I pay my bills on time, and yet I'm walking into lender A, B, and C, and they're all kind of telling me the same story, or telling me that, putting me in a position that even if they're willing to take a flyer on me, I don't know that I can afford this, right?
Right.
Just creating more financial tension in their life. And it's about understanding, like you said, the layers to the onion, right? Whether it's utilization or, again, I think one really beneficial side, especially for people like yourself and I that come with a mortgage background, it's actually the way I look at it, and I try to explain it and educate it to my clients, is the way an underwriter actually looks at things, actually
Right.
qualifies you. It's well beyond the score, right? The score, I've had plenty of lending situations where I've seen people with a 650 get better terms than somebody with a 720, and more often than not, that's because of the consistency in their habits, right?
Right.
What they did, how consistent they remain. You might have a higher score right now, but if time basically says that there's, when crisis happens in your life, that you might overextend yourself, you might become a higher risk, and or miss a payment here or there, then that's going to all be taken into factor. So there's so much that people don't understand, because again, not to sound like a broken record, but educational systems just didn't teach these things. Our families, we didn't bring this up at Sunday dinner. I myself came from a very blue collar working family that did what they needed to do to survive. And you can't teach the system if you haven't really mastered it, right? So unfortunately, bad habits kind of tend to stay like a hamster wheel and get passed down generation to generation until somebody decides that, they're going to be humble enough to do something about it. And so I get it. It's so important, again, at the end of the day, to realize that these aren't definitive of you as a person.
Right.
The system can be fixed, right? Like you said, credit is malleable. You
Right.
just as it was easy to get in the wrong side of things, you can put the work in to get to the right side of things. And if you have somebody that can, aside from teach you at surface level what can help you, but also go to bat for you behind the scenes, so to speak, it's worth the investment to yourself.
I love that. Well, and you brought up something that in my mind is so important, and I'm going to tell you why, because I have a very specific story that I was literally reading about a day or two ago in one of the women's groups that I'm a part of, kind of in Facebook. So you were talking about credit monitoring, and I think a lot of people are afraid to monitor their credit because it's going to make them feel bad about themselves or whatever. But credit is more than just what the score is. It's also about seeing what's popping up, right? So like what new credit stuff is popping up, what new inquiries, right? Is there a collection you don't know about? Because sometimes, especially if they're small medical, they don't even mail you. They're supposed to, but they don't. And so like it just pops up on your credit and then you don't know about it until you go to make some major purchase, right? A car, a house, something like this. And then you're like, what the heck? Why do I have this $400 medical collection or something popping up, etc.? But I say all that to say this is the other reason. So, a lot of times as a society, right, we're doing more and more where people are maybe getting married a little later. They are living with either roommates and or significant others, right? Some kind of combination, etc. And this particular woman had been living with this her boyfriend for 4 or 5 years, something like this. And unbeknownst to her, he had taken out several credit cards in her name. So I'm sure because they lived together, he either saw her social security number on something. He, of course, knew when her birthday was, right? And the crazy part is, you actually don't need that much information about a person to be able to apply for a credit card. And all these women in this group were like, well, how could he have done that? How could he have taken out something without her knowing? And I'm like, well, depends on the severity of like how big the financing thing was. So he probably couldn't have done that with like a car loan or a house loan, right? Like that would have been really hard. You had to provide a lot of data points, which people get very annoyed at mortgage about, but it's for your protection, right? We're trying to make sure that it's you know what you're borrowing, what it is, all the details, right? Like we're trying to hone in on that all for you. But credit cards are notoriously easy to like go online and submit something and get an approval and like that's it, right? Electronically sign. And that's basically what he had done because she was asking, like, what do I do? And I was like, well, first of all, that's fraud. And then second of all, you need to be, filing like with your police entity, etc., and then like calling the different respective creditors to tell them like this was not you. Um, but had she been monitoring her credit, had she been watching, she would have realized when this account popped up because it would have said new account and it would have said, XYZ creditor or whatever, and this is the limit. And it would have given her some of these details that she could have used and not be years down the path or however long it is down the path for her. Because now, not to say that he still won't get a fraud charge, etc., but how the creditors are going to handle some of these, debt bills, whatever, is going to be questionable, right? Like
Yeah.
what that is actually going to look like. And so I think a lot of times awareness is a really big thing. And I talk about that a lot. Financial mastery, like you said earlier, it isn't about being perfect. Okay. And you're going to come into different needs as different seasons of your life transpire. And as you're coming in and out of major life transitions and things like that, it's about, are you willing to be aware of what's happening in your financial life and then also willing to put in the work to pivot anything that maybe isn't
Yes.
where you want it to be.
Yes. No, absolutely. And again, I can't put that emphasis on the monitoring enough. And I see that same situation, Jax, even in our infancy, since we started Requalify 360, it's a pretty common theme.
It's
From
really sad.
it is, it really is. And unfortunately that falls into the category of, unfortunate life events happen. And obviously, especially those that it doesn't matter how good you think your situation may or may not be. You don't, if you're not protecting yourself behind the scenes, then it can infer a world of problem. When I have these clients that come to me, for me, or for them rather, it's really just kind of a convenience, because depending on how long something like that snowballed and how long an age of those accounts, it can be a lot of repetition and a lot of disputing and a lot of going to bat, obviously, both with the creditors, with the credit bureaus, getting the right justifications. The longer it goes, it's a more and more timely process. It's still fixable,
Right.
but at the end of the day, the convenience certainly goes out of the window, and that's where something like my company comes in. But and when it comes to credit monitoring, obviously, again, we all see the ads, we see the free platforms, and I'm a bit biased in the sense that I'm a true believer in particular categories that you get what you pay for. Okay.
Right.
And unfortunately, someone that's maybe not charging you for a service and that surface level maybe is okay to some degree. What do we see a lot of? We see a lot of they have to pay their bills somehow, right? So you're getting the
Yep.
email notifications of, wouldn't this credit card look great in your wallet, and this. So maybe some of those platforms might be a little bit outdated, even if you were like, but I have this on my phone. But here we go. We just did a full underwriting audit and pulled a 3 bureau report, and now we're coming up with a 5-figure debt scale that you had no knowledge about. And had you been monitoring, and again, this isn't to guilt or shame anybody into
Sure.
the situation. Unfortunately, these things do happen, but we have to learn how to protect ourselves moving forward. And sometimes we have to do that harder than others.
Stay tuned. We'll be back right after this message from our sponsors.
Welcome to Financial Mastery Simplified, your go-to podcast for making smart money decisions. We break down complex financial topics into easy-to-understand advice you can use every day. Our experts cover everything from budgeting and saving to investing and retirement planning. We give you the tools to take control of your money and build the future you want. With Financial Mastery Simplified, you'll feel informed and empowered to make the best choices for your financial health. Tune in to Financial Mastery Simplified on your favorite podcast platform. Start your journey to financial confidence today.
Visit us at fms.tips and fms.college for more information.
Welcome to House U, where we believe in the power of education. At House U, we're more than just a brand. We're your partner in home ownership, dedicated to educating, equipping, and empowering you every step of the way. Education is at the heart of everything we do. We offer comprehensive resources designed to make home ownership simple and accessible for all. From understanding mortgage options to mastering home maintenance, House U provides the knowledge you need to make informed decisions with confidence. We host workshops and seminars, bringing together experts and community members to share insights and build a stronger, more informed community. Because when you're educated, you're empowered. House U, home ownership made simple for all. Visit our website or contact us today to start your journey with House U. Empower yourself with knowledge and embrace the joy of home ownership.
Thanks for your patience. Now back to our conversation.
And equally, and I talked to quite a few groups myself, in particular, because you kind of brought it up, but particularly, when it comes to women's advocacy in the credit world, because one thing that I really run into a lot, aside from the fraudulent side of things, is how many people, particularly women, are out there in what they deem the happy marriage, or one spouse or their spouse handles all of the finances, right? That's
Right.
another big thing we see. And then life happens. I had a couple of clients recently, very similar circumstances, both in their 40s, both going through divorce, were complete credit ghosts, right? It really had no understanding of how to get started, what to do. And now they're faced with having to build a life. And it's like being 18 years old again, because, depending on the industry you're looking at, you can get treated for having no credit just as poorly as having bad credit, right? So
Right.
it's what the big picture circles back to is take the time, take 10 minutes a week even to learn something new, to monitor, to check your balances. Absolutely, check every bill that comes in the house, right? It's you have to get over the shame spiral hump of what you don't know or what you don't want to face. We have to look at it dead on. And so many of these instances, it's easy to say yes, that it could have been avoidable, but it's simple because it's true, right? And at the end of the day, if we're ready to kind of take that initiative in ourselves, it can be rebuilt. There is a process. Your friend can absolutely, get course corrected, if you will. And I'm sure we'll be better off, unfortunately, for having learned the hard way, so to speak. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's really the monitoring is so important. Whether it's an inquiry that you have no idea that popped up, an account. I mean, Consumer Reports did a survey or a report this year. 34% of people had at least, when monitoring their credit, that hadn't had at least one inaccurate or unknown item on their credit
Oh yeah.
report that they had no idea about. Now, there's so many categories that could fall into. It could certainly fall into something fraudulent. It could be a duplicate account. It could be mistaken identity. Your name could be John Smith, and you're fighting an uphill battle.
Yep.
Or it could have been something that maybe was even a mistake of the past that should have been removed years ago, but yet there it is, still doing damage on a month-to-month basis. So, the removal of these items definitely can have a tremendous increase in credit health. But again, it all starts with the monitoring. If we can be in the habit of being with the right systems, the right companies, to have real-time and on-time results and notifications, and actually take the time. 10 minutes doesn't sound like a lot when we say it, but yet we're not finding enough time to actually put in the work. So put in the time to monitor your credit, especially if you know down the road you want certain financing opportunities. Like I said, whether it's the home, the car, a business, your credit is used as a catalyst for all of these things now. And that's to steer that into is where I see, after monitoring, it's hitting the reset button. And again, mastery, yes, is confidence, but it's also understanding. So many people come to me and they think that the solution to wealth is making more money.
Right.
Personally, I
It's
say
not.
pump the brakes on that. I think financial mastery is understanding your money, and how you can make that and budget that and make that work for you before adding more. Because it doesn't matter how many homes, even if you have a decent enough credit score, it doesn't matter how many homes you invest in or how many, if your financial tension within the core of your own life, because you're not doing the right monitoring, or you're not maybe making all the right decisions, and you're paying higher interest rates, and you're paying security deposits, and your insurance rates are higher, that you're not going to see the fruit of your own labor and your own hard work until you kind of attack the core of that first. And again, monitoring all day. I shout it from the rooftops that we need to be more consistent in that department.
Well, and I think it's interesting you were talking a little bit about some of these. You alluded to some of the companies that don't charge you, which again, there is some merit there, right? Like sometimes just like to get a quick, peek or whatever, but you definitely have to ignore all of the advertisements. And I say this kind of in jest because I get advertisements from them all the time about all these amazing credit cards that I can apply for. I can promise you, based off of where my financial picture is currently, credit wise, there's no way that pretty much any credit card would accept me at this moment. So I think that's hilarious when they send that. So you also have to take it with a grain of salt that if you are going to utilize a free service, although there is some information, like Ron said, that is helpful and good, right? You have to be very careful because they a lot of times are going to give you false hope, which by the way is going to increase the shame cycle because you're going to think, oh, I'm going to get this thing and it's going to help me here and it's going to improve the situation. And then you're going to get denied potentially. And when that happens, then you're going to feel bad about yourself. You're going to feel like, oh no. I also agree that financially women should be taking a more active participant and more of a seat at the table. It isn't about making more money or you being the breadwinner, or maybe you are the breadwinner, or any of that. It's about the fact that so many women, and I cannot tell you how many times in moms groups and all these different things, where the woman has no idea what the financial situation looks like, or she has no money of her own. Even if you are a stay-at-home mom, you should have an account where you have some of your own money, your own ability to spend it, things like this or whatever, right? Like, you need to be an active participant in your life and not just outsource that to your spouse. Because, first of all, marriage can end, unfortunately, right? I mean, and over 50% of them do. But then beyond that, somebody could absolutely drop dead, right? Like, or something tragic could happen. Not that we hope that that happens to a single soul who's listening, but that is reality, is that some of that is going to take place and transpire. And if you don't have an idea of what's going on, do you have your own credit? What does his credit look like? What does your financials overall look like? Like, what all these things look like, then what happens is that, first of all, if you do get divorced, you're in a very bad negotiating power position because you have no understanding of where you stand at all. And so the other person's ability to hide money on you or do things like this is a lot more likely, right? Number one. Then number two, you also feel really stupid. I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've helped women refinance the home, right? Because they need to put it into only their name. And they feel like they're dumb, and they're not dumb at all. It's just they never dealt with it. They never experienced it or whatever. And so we give them the big rocks. We empower them to make the decisions, and like, here's how this works. This is why this makes sense or doesn't make sense or whatever. And we're telling me all these pieces, but a lot of it is because they just haven't been an active participant in their own lives. And I definitely get it, because there's definitely days that in my own financial house, I want to bury my head in the sand. And there are certain things I definitely let my husband handle, that I am not handling. However, it doesn't mean that I don't know what's going on, or that I am not having a conversation with him, and like maybe he's actually executing the action. And so I think a lot of times when people listen to that, they're like, oh, well, you're asking me to do a bunch of things that I'm not the highest and best use in our in our joint relationship to make the decision. No, I'm not asking for that. I'm saying that you should be involved, and for reasons like this happens a lot in my family and in my parents community, is maybe the person who's been handling the finances all the way around, either the woman or the man, is now starting to have dementia. And one of the early signs a lot of times is that they're kind of making missteps with money because they think they're handling certain things that they're not, because their brain is kind of betraying itself. And so, again, if you don't have an understanding of what's going on in your financial world, you may not see these things unfold until it's a lot more catastrophic. It's a lot harder to crawl your way out of, if you will.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's just it too. It's not relationship sabotage to be involved. And
Correct.
we tend to be a creature, humans that is, right, that we love convenience in our lives. But there are some things that you can't just put on the back burner, or even if you're going to have your spouse and your trusted partner kind of battle the front line, so to speak, you should absolutely still be involved. You should, again, that goes back into, even if it's 10 minutes a week, 10 minutes a day, ideally, but even if it's 10 minutes a week to review, monitor, open up the books. And here's the other thing, and I use technology for so much, and it's so helpful as somebody running a business, in just day-to-day life. But we become so reliant on it that I think sometimes there's also a separation of reality, right? Like sometimes, the bills, they don't seem like people take as much ownership in what they necessarily have coming in and coming out, because it's not all coming in the mail. You're not keeping a journal or a composition notebook anymore with your
Right.
budget. And I think sometimes in that 10 minutes and kind of, circling back to maybe some more old school methodologies, it puts more of a reality into the situation you're in. Just like saying something, you can't really move forward or plan without kind of admitting it to yourself and saying it out loud. sometimes when you crunch the numbers and you actually take the time to write it out, or again, have that partnered conversation with your partner and saying, this is what we have coming in, this is what we have obligated going out. We need to set X amount aside. These are our goals. I just don't see it enough anymore, right? It's just those simple things can have you so much more prepared. If you just trust it upon your partner's behalf that, hey, we live a good life, the home's good, there's always, the lights are on and the groceries are full. What happens when the unexpected happens? Because life will always throw curveballs when you least expect it. And like you said, God bless and knock on wood, I wouldn't wish ill on anyone, but unfortunately, the reality of the situation is like we said, divorce does happen even when you least expect it. Illnesses happen, death happens, loss happens, and you need to prepare. It's like being a backup quarterback, right? You got to be prepared to go on the field if your first string goes down, right? So it's the same concept in life. You have to prepare every day, even if you're not the one writing the check, so to speak. You still have to understand what is obligated to you, because that's what a partnership really is. It's not just leaning all the power to one side, because unfortunately bad things happen, and when they do, you don't want to be caught square on your heels. So taking just that little bit of extra time every week, keeping it with communication, right? Just having an open dialogue. And I think that's the other part, and I'll kind of finish this sentiment with that, is it has to be, and I think people need to feel this way, but it has to be a judgment-free zone, right?
Right.
We're not perfect. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have to admit that you spent so much at Starbucks that week, or whatever the case might be. It's just, it has to be a judgment-free zone, because, that's where, those are the types of things that kind of build up that guard, that shame spiral, that guilt, that defensive, that fear of having the conversation. And I think if people can just, leave judgment at the door, have a realistic, open look at their current system, and also do what they need to do, whether it's talk to somebody like me or educate themselves, and how, whatever platform, that's the real important. It's about educating yourself, because there's always, no matter how good you think you have it, you can always get better. You can always learn something new, but you got to take the time to do it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and as we're kind of coming to a close here, I would like to point out that a lot of times you feel like other people have it more together than you. I can promise you, like, I have friends who are well educated, they're intelligent people or whatever, and they don't always have some of these pieces in place as much like they should. And so a lot of times you just have to understand and realize that you got to put one foot in front of the other, right? Take one small step. Like he's suggesting, take 10 minutes out of your day to, sit down and be like, okay, where are some of these little pieces at, right? Because a lot of times that's the whole thing, is that the reason it becomes this unsurmountable, just horrible thing is because we haven't taken the time, and we are also stuck in Instagram land where everything is perfect and everyone else has made all the right decisions and we haven't made the right decisions. And so we don't want to be real with ourselves, because that makes us a bad person, when in reality, like I said, and that's why I talk about my challenges, is not because I like admitting that, right? It's not exactly like a super fun thing, right? I mean, what kind of imposter syndrome do you think that gives me, right? I'm over here, I teach about money, I help people manage it, I have a podcast about financial mastery, and I have done some major missteps, okay? But the whole point is that you can master things in your own way, in your own time, as long as you're taking the next step forward, one foot in front of the other, in front of the other, no matter what's happened, no matter how bad it gets or whatever, right? If you can always see it as things happening for you and not to you, and like, what is it teaching you? How can we learn from it? You're going to find that it's maybe not really quite as bad as you think it is. And I have to remind myself of that all of the time, right? Like when the next shoe, so to speak, drops, right? And so I just have to keep down the path. And so Ron, thank you so much for being our guest on this episode. And tell everybody, I think you have something that they'd like to offer. You'd like to offer them if they want to mention the podcast. So tell them what that is.
Absolutely. And again, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure just to have an open conversation about these things, and it's so important. And that's what we need as a whole to get in the habit of, is just having the conversation. But absolutely, any of your valued listeners, if anything we talked about here today, kind of hits a note or strikes home, or something that you can relate to, and you're ready to kind of have that conversation and see if there are improvements that you can better make to master your own finances to get you ultimately to the destination you wish to go. Reach out to me. You can reach out to me directly and schedule a free consultation at www.requalify360. That's requalify360.com. And typically, there is a process that if you were to move forward with us and go into an underwriting audit scenario, I will actually, for anybody that wants to mention the podcast or says that this led them to me, I will waive the audit fee of $149, which is an amazing value. Beyond that, also to promote, it's a very affordable process. If you want to have somebody that can work with you, we're a pay-as-you-go service. We are not there to add any more financial stress. Obviously, we have a company to certainly run, but we want to do it the right way. So let's start that by offering that to your viewers and your listeners. That if they come out and say, hey, Ron, I heard your podcast with Jax at Financial Mastery, then we will waive that audit fee and get them started on the right foot.
Perfect. I love that. And thank you so much for being here again. And hopefully this episode of Financial Mastery Simplified helped you. And we look forward to seeing you again next week on another episode of Financial Mastery Simplified.